believe that everything in life relates to gun training, and everything in gun training relates to life. Join us as we explore the Defender's lifestyle through the lens of self-improvement. Welcome to Defenders Live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Defenders Live. I'm your host, Laura Thorson, and I'm so glad you're with us tonight. I have a special treat for you tonight. Steve Tarani is on with us. He is a defensive instructor, author, and speaker. Many more titles and accolades than I can name right here, right now. But I'm going to be introducing him here pretty soon. And he's going to be laying out some really important information that I think you guys are going to want to hear about keeping yourself safe. But before we bring Steve on, I just want to say thank you so much for watching tonight. If you're new, welcome. If you're watching this as a replay, welcome as well. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, do all those fun things, and share this with other people that you think might get some value out of this. And also, please in the comments, go ahead and drop where you're watching from. We want to hear from you guys throughout this live. We're going to have a live Q&A with Steve towards the end of the broadcast. So if you have a question that pops in your mind, go ahead, drop that in the comments because we're going to be gathering those at the end of the broadcast. Also, we are also going to be going into our win of the week this week. That's something new that we just started a couple weeks ago. So be thinking about what your win of the week is. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It can be a small thing, and I'll be sharing mine as well a little bit later. Our founder of Defenders USA, Adam Winch, is behind the scenes tonight. He is traveling, and his internet is hit and miss. So we'll see. He might pop on the screen and say hi, and he may not. We never know about Adam, but he is behind the scenes helping me tonight so we can make this as smooth as possible for you. So last reminder before we get to our special guest, don't forget to go to defenders-live.com for all things Defenders Live. If you don't want to miss a future broadcast, be sure to sign up for our email list so I can communicate with you, keep you up to date. And another good place you can go is on Facebook. We have a Defenders Live with Laura Thorson group. So be sure to check that out. And also on Defenders Live website, you can look at past episodes, see past guests, and go to our partners page and help us out there. Any service or product that's up there is because we believe in those products and services, and we believe in the people behind them. So be sure to check that out as well. There might be something there that can help you out. All right. So let's see if anybody is out there watching tonight. Looks like we've got people from Arizona, Colorado, Arkansas, Texas, Michigan. Hey, Kathy and Lynn. Let's see. Oh, you're in New Mexico, Adam? I didn't know you were in New Mexico tonight. All right. And Clint from Houston is here. So, all right. So you guys got to be thinking of some good questions for Steve if I don't already ask him. So really looking forward to hearing from all of you tonight and in talking with Steve. We have a lot to go over tonight. And as usual, I am trying to prioritize everything so we can get through as much of it as possible. So let's bring on Steve here. Steve is a professional educator, author, and keynote speaker. He served in the U.S. defense, law enforcement, and intelligence communities for over 35 years as a respected subject matter expert, service provider in protection, firearms, and defensive tactics to numerous high and low profile federal agencies. This bio, you guys, it's a mouthful. Hang with me here. Formerly sworn, Tarani is a former full-time CIA Protective Programs employee and was formerly on staff at the U.S. Department of Energy National Security Institute at Kirkland Air Force Base. He served on the POTUS 45 pre-election executive protection detail and is a DOD and, how do I say that? We'll ask him whenever he gets on here. Flet-c, I think, FLETC-certified firearms instructor who's been on the staff at Gunsite Academy for over 20 years. And he's formerly an adjunct instructor at the SIG Arms Academy for over 16 years, specializing in situational awareness-based training. Tarani is also the published author of 9 books and contributes monthly to numerous industry periodicals. I mean, whew, that's a lot. All right, so I think it would be good. Let's get Steve on here and get this going because we've got a lot to go through. Hey, Steve, your mute is on.
Hey, Laura.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. It's good to be here at Defenders Live.
Well, we have a lot to go over, and I think probably what would make the most sense, if you don't mind, is I have a question sort of tying into your background and how you got started in all this. And then I want to get into some of the things that I learned in your book, Your Most Powerful Weapon, which we'll be talking about a little bit later. And then we'll see how far we get until we can get on to the other stuff. But so just to start out, I'm interested to know, that was a long list of credentials, right? And I'm interested to know what part of your background that I just highlighted do you feel was the most substantial to overall growth in becoming a protector or defender, or whatever you want to call that? Was it a combination of things, or was there any experience in any particular area that really hit home for you?
Well, I have to attribute it to that time that Adam found me under a bridge with a cardboard sign that says, "We'll train for food."
Oh, I love people with a sense of humor.
No, you're right. It's a combination. I mean, it's accumulation of all your experiences and adventures in life, and the many people that you interact with and work with and train with, and on many different levels, all contribute to that.
Yeah, I imagine that was the case. I didn't know if you had a standout moment or anything that had happened that particularly stood out to you. I do recall you saying at one point something about, and we'll get into this a little bit later, the story about a person that hired you, I think when you were in a government position, and they said that you failed multiple times if you had to use your firearm in that job. And so I think that was really interesting to hear, because that's not what we typically think, I imagine.
Right. So what you're referring to was an event. So before you go on an assignment, you get briefing, pre-deployment briefing. And I was with a group of folks who were doing some protection work. And the guy who was doing the pre-deployment briefing had been on for 30 years, very experienced, salty silverback gorilla, and the rest of us gorillas in the room, were looking up to him. And one of the requirements before you could deploy is you had to qualify with certain firearms. And if you did not qualify at a high enough level, you could not deploy. So of course we all kept our quals up as high as we could keep them. And pretty important element to be skilled in that department. And then he comes up on top of the podium and says to us, "If you boys go to guns, you failed." And we all kind of looked at him, we're all, gorillas with the knuckles forward. What? What are you saying? So he goes in detail. He goes, "Look, you guys are protective agents, and you're out there and you're with your protectees. And if your first response is to go to guns, well, where do you think the bullets coming at you are going to go to? Your protectee. So if your first response is immediate, highest level of force, highest level of use of force, well then, you started it essentially." So he says, "I have an idea." He likened the firearms to the lifeboats on the Titanic. And he says, "Do you need to know how to use the lifeboats?" Of course, the answer is yes. He says, "But I have an idea. How about look for an iceberg?" We're all shaking our heads. Yeah. And then if you see an iceberg, drive around it, So if you fail to look for an iceberg and you smash into an iceberg and you fail to drive around the iceberg, you failed multiple times. Then do you need to know how to use the lifeboats? The answer is yes. Yeah. And that's, if you can equate that to protection, I don't care who you could be the head of your family, you're with a friend, you're with a family member, you're with a coworker, you are your own protective agent. and your responsibility is to keep your protectee as safe at the highest level you can in any environment. So if you immediately go to guns, which is not recommended, then you have failed miserably in your job.
I just think that's so valuable. I can't tell you the number of times where I've had people, because I'm a firearms instructor, and I've had people come up to me and say, "Hey, I want to learn to shoot my gun, and in case I get in a self-defense situation." Absolutely, you should train those skills, no doubt about it. But they miss all the stuff before that, the foundational knowledge, mindset, etc., that I personally believe must be considered prior to that. I mean, especially in America today, being, having to cover yourself legally, financially, and so many other ways, it's very prudent of you and smart of you to be aware of those things.
Well, I think I'd like to offer a real world example to support what you're saying there, Laura. And we talked about this before. My student in California, an excellent shooter, very skilled. He has his CC, everything legal, CCW. He was in an incident where he was in a bad situation. Bad guy had him in a confined area. Behind the bad guy was an exterior concrete wall, so it was a good backstop. And my student, we'll just call him Joe for now. It's not his real name. So there was Joe, gets confronted with this guy who was, had a weapon out. And so Joe carried concealed inside the waistband, and he is very well trained. He can easily be around a second or less from concealment. Precision shooting. He's very, very good, high level performance shooter. So he could have easily handled the situation with his firearm, and justifiably so. It was a completely justifiable shoot. However, in his mind, he goes through the scenario while he's being confronted with this bad guy. And it may sound like it took a long time, but to him, it was like a couple of seconds. And he was thinking, okay, if I stop this threat using a firearm, here I am in California, one of the most litigious states in the union. And then if it is a justifiable shoot, then, okay, he passes criminal court, but then now you go to civil court, and that's somebody's baby that you hurt really badly or maybe killed. And, so then you're going to be, you need an attorney. So that could take somewhere between, the rough ballpark is somewhere in the $80,000 to $150,000 range. While this is all going on, you're in hearings and depositions, could be anywhere from 2 to 3 years. In some cases, I've heard even more. And then while that's all going on, law enforcement takes all your firearms away. You can't have a firearm while you're in this situation. So, think about that. Somewhere in the $100,000 range, 3 to 5 years of your life completely disarmed. Mm-hmm. Is it worth it when there's a lower level solution? So what he ended up doing was, throwing his wallet on the ground. Guy got $100 for his efforts, and he immediately got in his cell and canceled his cards.
Problem solved.
Saved him $140,000.
Yeah. Wow, that's a perfect example. That is perfect. So getting into your book, which I have right here. So if you guys, he's an author of 9 books, but I have this one, Your Most Powerful Weapon. My friend Trish introduced me to this book after she took one of your classes. And I borrowed her book, and then I went and got a copy of my own. And so highly recommend this book. If you guys have not read it, please check that out. And what are some of the other titles of books that you have written, Steve?
So my bestseller is Preventive Defense, or Prefense, like I have on my shirt, Prefense. Mm-hmm. And that is currently being revised. So that'll be out again here in another month or two. So that's basically Your Most Powerful Weapon is the Reader's Digest version of Prefense, which has tremendous amount of information, traveling, hotels, ground transportation, everything you could possibly imagine for keeping safe is in that book. I've written a couple of knife books. I have experience as an edge weapons. I'm an edge weapons designer. In fact, my new line just launched yesterday on D-Day, and
Awesome.
doing very well. And so there's information there on edged weapons, defensive tactics, contact weapons defense, things along those lines. All hard skills, mostly hard
Yeah.
skills. So
Yeah.
to answer your question from earlier, I've transitioned from hard skills. I started out in the hard skills world, defensive tactics, hand-to-hand, edged weapons, improvised weapons, firearms, etc. That's all hard skills. And yes, in the use of force continuum, it may be the case you do need to go to hard skills, but over 90% of your problems can be solved with soft skills. And if I could go into a little bit about the difference between and the advantages of hard and soft skills.
That was one of my questions, Steve. So take it away.
Didn't mean to jump ahead of the game here.
No, it's perfect.
So in my humble opinion, there are two critical life-saving skill sets, and they can be divided under the category of what type of measure they are. So your skill sets, the two of them are reactive measures and proactive measures. Your reactive measures mean that you are, responding to something, and that's a hard skill, whether you're using your hands for self-defense, a gun, whatever it may be, that's a hard skill. All hard skills require the use of your body, all of them. You cannot perform a hard skill without using your body. Anytime you involve your body, you introduce the potential for injury. So the first skill set we're discussing here is reactive measures, which are hard skills where you use your body and introduce the potential for injury. The second set of life-saving skills I like to present is proactive measures. These are not reactive. That's the opposite. These are called soft skills, where you use your most powerful weapon, your mind. And there's no way you can get hurt because since you're not using your body, there's no way you can introduce or incur bodily injury. Of the two, reactive measures and proactive measures, which do you think are more effective?
Proactive.
Right, because if you are very good at your soft skills, you will never need your hard skills. In fact, if you fail at your soft skills, you may need hard skills.
Right. And most people, I don't say unfortunately, sorry. It kind of bothers me that hard skills are, maybe it's because people think it's fun to shoot guns. I get that, right? I love shooting too. So, but I feel like this other part is missed sometimes, don't you?
Well, let me actually give you real world examples. In fact, I'd like our viewers and listeners to participate in this very short question. So
okay,
go ahead and think about from the time you were, let's say, a very little kid. I'm going to make this up, 4 or 5 years old. If you can think back that far, I have a hard time. That was a long time ago. That's when they had covered wagons and dinosaurs. So think about that. Around age 4 to 5 years old, from that time to a few minutes ago when this show started, in all that length of time, think about what percentage of that time you have ever been involved in a face in the dirt, dragged down, teeth knocked out in the curb, blood everywhere, hard skills situation. And then consider what is the percentage that you used soft skills. You noticed somebody maybe cut in front of you while you were driving, or noticed someone was looking at you, something like that. What percentage would you say from all that time you used your hard skills versus soft skills? What would you say, Laura? Ballpark.
I don't know, 1% maybe? I don't know.
The real answer, because we included law enforcement, is 2%. 2% of our lives. And I think our viewers and listeners, I don't think it's going to be that far away from that 1 to 2%. And then the 98% of the time is using your soft skills. Here's the second part of this question. From here moving forward, do you think those percentages would change?
I hope not. Yeah. Wow. So then let's get into that's what this book is primarily about. And so if there was an overarching theme of this book, if you could take away a synopsis that you wish everyone knew from this book, what would that be?
Here's the secret of the universe 27-J53. Secret of the universe. The universe secret is that the more you use your soft skills, the less you need your hard skills. So when you're let's say applying your situational awareness, something like that, you're looking at something, and I want to go into a little bit deeper about the difference between looking and seeing.
Yeah, I have a question about that.
You tend to be like you do anything else. Like I'll give you an example. Let's take driving. When you first learn to drive, you're in the parking lot, white knuckle, eyes as big as saucers. You're going 2 miles an hour, and you feel like you need to wear a helmet, right? Over time, you get more and more and more familiar with the steering wheel and the brake and all that, and then you get more comfortable. After you're familiar, you're more comfortable, and then before you know it, you're eating a hamburger. You're doing all stuff while you're driving with your kneecaps,
Even though you shouldn't.
Even though you shouldn't, but my point is that you've become very comfortable with it, and it's no longer an issue for you because you've kind of mastered that skill, so to speak. So the same thing with soft skills. The exact same scenario applies. Here you are applying your soft skills. The more you use them, it's like going to the gym. The more or running or yoga, whatever, the more you do it, that exercise, the stronger you get, the better you get at it. Mm-hmm. And after a while, you reach a point, some of the best agents on the planet have never gone to guns one time.
So what are some examples then for people who haven't read the book of soft skills and that we need to be thinking about and applying in our lives?
Okay, so here's a good example, and I'll take it on a micro level. I mean, it's, as you can see in the book, there's a lot of information, but
yeah,
the baby version of one of them is, let me put it in a real world scenario. Let's say, how many of us have ever put our eyes on our watch and looked at our watch and had to see what time it is and had to look at it again? How many of us have ever done that? Have you ever done that, Laura?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
You look at your watch. So what happened there was you put your eyeballs on an object, in this case, your watch, and you looked right at it. Your eyes were right on the face of that watch. In fact, you did it again, except the first time you weren't there. Your mind was somewhere else. The second time you did the exact same physical action, your mind was engaged. That is the difference between looking and seeing. A trained agent will look around the room and see everything. An untrained person will look and see nothing. So the purpose of that exercise is for you to engage your mind with your environment. Without engaging your mind, you cannot absorb the information that your eyes are telling you because you're not engaged.
And then let's say that you were scanning your environment, you saw something out of place that looked, I don't know about that. Then your awareness goes to that and you decide whether or not that is something you should pay closer attention to. What from there should we be paying attention to?
Let's go back a little bit. You're on the right track. That's exactly the flow, but we can further analyze that flow. So there are two types of events. There's an event where you would look at it and see this event unfold. Let me give you an example. You watch someone reach for a doorknob, and that event indicator, what does that event indicate to you is going to happen next after you see someone reach for a doorknob? What do you think is going to happen?
They'll probably open the door.
Very good. That's an indicator that the event is going to happen, right? Someone moves their foot from the brake and moves it over to the gas pedal. What does that event indicate might happen next?
Acceleration.
Exactly. So we see thousands of these event indicators all day long. However, when we see an event indicator that makes the hair on your neck stand up and get your attention, like you had mentioned earlier, now that is what can be considered a potential threat. So that might be a threat indicator. If you are continuing to pay further attention to it and you observe that it is an anomaly, or what we call above or below the baseline, which we'll cover a little later, then that may indicate that that potential threat is an actual threat. And then you have to make the decision, is it an actionable item? If it is an actionable item, then you have to take appropriate action. If it is not an actionable item, it gets dismissed and you're done with it. It's just as simple as that.
And the number one action that a concealed carrier, that a civilian should take if they see something that they're not involved in escalating, their number one solution is to leave.
So again, there are three. We can go further into the bunny hole on this one. So there, you have three options. You can avoid a situation, you can mitigate its impact, make it less on you, or you can defend against it. The further you go from left to right, avoid, mitigate, defend, the closer you must move into your hard skills. The further you stay to the left of it, the better you are in the world of soft skills. So hence you get the term left of bang. I'm sure you've read the book, Jason Riley, etc. Great book, by the way, if you haven't read it. So you want to stay left of bang. Bang is the actual event. That's the guy pulling the knife out or the gun going off, where that's the term bang. So you have no other option at bang than to react. And if you're using reactive measures, of course, that's your hard skills, which you incur potential for injury because you're using your body. If you can stay to the left of that, i.e. mitigation and or avoidance, especially avoidance, you remain in the soft skills, and you can remain away from potential injury or harm, not only to yourself, but to your protectees, those people who are with you.
Right. And just for clarification, when he talks about protectees, he's talking about your loved ones. He mentioned this to me earlier. As moms and dads, we have people in our lives that we protect, or just people around us. You talked about real estate agents too. I mean, that's a profession that can be potentially dangerous sometimes. And I do think those skills are very, very needed in that profession particularly, don't you think?
Right, absolutely. So imagine having, okay, I'll give you some real world. So, you might have to go overseas, and whatever it is, you're a traveling person, and maybe you're on vacation or something like that. Well, you can't carry a carbine, can't carry a pistol, you're overseas. In most countries, you can't even carry a knife. So I offer a training program, which is called Improvised Weapons, which can teach you how to use your scarf, a t-shirt, your purse strap, anything like that as a defensive weapon of opportunity. But if you're going to those kinds of places, would it not be beneficial to have the skills of a highly trained, experienced, professional protective agent to be able to see, recognize potential threats, determine whether or not it's an actionable item, and to be able to avoid, mitigate, or defend against that threat without needing to go to hard skills? It's a good thing to have. Better to have and not need than to need and not have.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about in your book too about, I don't know if you use the term radical acceptance, but I know part of the physiology and the psychology really of somebody who's never considered anything could ever happen to them versus someone who's considered it and prepared as much as they could, requires a radical acceptance of what's going on in the moment. And then also the will to act. Could you speak to that? What does that mean?
Sure. So you're talking about that section on how to become a hard target, right? So if you're let's for our viewers and our listeners, there's two types of the predator's optic is very binary. You're either a soft target or a hard target to them. So a soft target means you're a easy prey, low-hanging fruit, not a lot of work to get from you what they want, victim, so to speak. If you're a hard target, well, they're going to have to work a lot harder for it, and they could get hurt or possibly killed. So, those types of folks don't want to risk that injury or possibly death, especially if you're very well trained, and they can sense that. So the division of soft and hard is here's the big difference. The delineator is those who are trained versus those who are not trained. So if you want to be trained and you want to be a hard target, it would require 3 pieces to the puzzle. The first one is to expect, adopt the idea that, hey, right after this podcast, I'm going to go to, making this up, I'm going to go to the store down the street and I'm going to pick up, a bag of ice or something like that. And you go down the street to the store and you expect, what? Something could be a threat here, and I expect that it could happen. Now, it probably won't. Odds are it won't. But just accepting the fact that something bad could happen to good people, i.e. you and the folks that are with you, your protectees, just having that mindset that it could potentially happen puts you one step above the person who absolutely doesn't have a clue. The second thing is to have the will. Okay, let's say something does happen. Do you have the will to either get yourself and your protectees out of there or to manage that threat in another way? Because if you don't have the will to do that, it's never gonna happen. And then lastly, the third item is to have a plan. Let's say you're walking into that store and you walk into a firefight, you hear the gunfire or whatever it is.
That's the iceberg.
You turn right around, go right back into your car. You've avoided all that, right? So those are the 3 things. Again, adopt the fact that bad things do happen to good people and it could happen to you, and not some far off date, in the imaginary future, but right now, the split second you walk into that store. The second item, again, is have the will. If you need to, and it might be stop the threat, or it might be get you and your protectees off the X. And then lastly, have a plan. Okay, if I walk in there and it's really bad, I'm just going to turn around, go to the driver's side, open the door, and exit.
That's really good. I want to see, let's see, might be one more question here before we go into our win of the week. So guys, we're going to take like a teeny little break here, halfway point, and look at your wins of the week. So if you have any wins of the week that you want to share with everybody, I think that's a really important part of growing, and we want to celebrate those. But like before we get into that really quickly, which question? I have 3 here. How important do you think, Steve, it is for people to be very brutally honest about their abilities and limitations from a hard skill level, even from a soft skill level? Because I think that the more honest you are with yourself and the more you know about your abilities, the better you can make decisions in the moment about, like, for example, if you're in an active shooter situation and the guy is 50 yards away and there are, people running around screaming, whatever, like, just because you have a gun in that moment, you need to be very smart about the decisions you make and know your particular skill level and ability. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
that's
You
something
have to
that's
know.
crossed my mind.
You do
And
have
I
to
think
know.
Adam even made a video about that too.
You do have to know your capabilities, the extent of your capabilities. There are people who train really well. I know guys who can make a 50-yard shot like that. No problem, easy day, because they train it all the time, and they're very, very good at it. And it's not something that they're reaching beyond the edge of their skills envelope. It's well within their capability. So if you do know that, it gives you the edge, so to speak, because you know how far you can go and what you're capable of. But there's a lot of other mitigating circumstances that you need the conditions at the time. I'll give you some examples. You're at a shopping mall and there's a guy with a gun, like in your example, 50 yards away, and he's popping rounds into the crowd. You are standing right next to an exterior steel door with your family, and it is less than 2 seconds for you to get yourself and your family outside that steel door and behind an exterior concrete wall. Or use your skills to try and take the shot at whatever it is, 40 yards, whatever, something like that, well within your skill set. So which would you do?
Well, I think isn't that something you need to think about in advance on whether or not you would just flee the situation for your own safety, or would you go after to defend other people's lives?
So this is a question we always work with. I train a lot of law enforcement. We do a lot of work with cop, and their responsibility is to their job and to their department and the agency and their community to
Mhm.
stop the threat. However,
Yeah.
you as a civilian, that's not your job. That's
Right.
not your
Right.
responsibility. What is
Mhm.
your highest priority is to keep yourself and your protectees alive and safe.
Mhm.
So if
Mhm.
that's your highest priority, and you have two options: a tactical response, which is to get you and you and your protectees off the X, or engage in a firefight standing right next to your protectees. Which of the two is
Right.
more
No, I
likely
think you
to
should get them to safety first. Yeah, I think you should get them to safety first, but I guess then I don't know. Would you go back? I don't know. That depends
Well, my,
on the
my, my
person.
point is, and
Yeah,
that's
I get
exactly the point, Laura. You have to know what is my responsibility.
yeah.
That goes along with what are my capabilities. What
Mhm.
are you capable of? What is the edge of your skill envelope? You have
Mhm.
to establish what are my priorities, what is my responsibilities, what is my limitations. Once you know though the answers to those questions, that makes your tactical decisions much easier in a real world altercation.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of priorities, part of my win of the week this week has to do with one of my biggest priorities. So, if you don't mind, we're going to go into that for just a short minute. And maybe you've got one, Steve. I don't know. We just talk about our win of the week here really briefly. I will share mine. And then if anybody has anything in the comments, and also be thinking about questions for Steve because this hour's flying by as I knew it would. My win of the week is not something huge. I know last week I talked about that steel challenge match I did really well in, and I was excited about that. This week I have a different kind of win of the week. So I had something that I tried this week that was really hard, and I failed miserably at it. And I struggled really hard with it. And my win of the week was when my 11-year-old daughter came up to me afterwards and told me how proud she was of me. And she says, "I thought you did really great, mom. I'm really proud of you." And it just instantly brought tears to my eyes because I really failed this thing, man. It was a huge struggle. But whenever she said that to me, it just, nothing else mattered anymore. Like I was, I was proud of myself that I tried. I was really proud that I showed her that I tried and failed, and that I didn't give up. So there's my win of the week. Let's see if we've got anyone shouting out in the chat here. Oh, Adam, you starred him for me. That was so nice of you. So Scott says, my win of the week last Thursday, I met my 30-pound weight loss goal. Then Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman seminar on Friday. Wow, that is a really big win. Huge win, Scott. Congratulations. That's so good. And like I said, they don't have to be huge, but that's a big one. Haven Defense Company came in fifth in the division for IDPA. Good job carrying appendix. So that worked out really well. And Kara says, taught my first advanced pistol skills class this past weekend to some local IDPA competitive shooters, and it went awesome. That's great, Kara. Good to hear that. And is this Adam here? The opportunity to compete in Steel Challenge this week and did okay after almost 2 months off. Sometimes just did okay is a win. Sometimes it is. That's so good. Do we have any other ones? Oh, Kathy's got one here. My win of the week is that I read both the Inner Game of Tennis and the Dry Fire Primer this past weekend. Wow, you've really been getting some reading in, Kathy. Very good. That's funny you mentioned the inner game of tennis. Actually, that's a perfect segue into the next question I want to talk to you about, Steve. Um, I don't know if you're familiar with this book, The Inner Game of Tennis. I think maybe, I don't know if I showed that to you before or not,
You
but
do.
anyway.
I am
Yeah.
familiar with this. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, well there's an excerpt from that book that I wanted to read to you and get your insight on. On page 126, if you guys have that book. Um It says, perhaps the most indispensable tool for human beings in modern times is the ability to remain calm in the midst of rapid and unsettling changes. The people who will best survive the present age are the ones Kipling described as those who can keep their heads while all about are losing theirs. Inner stability is achieved not by burying one's head in the sand at the sight of danger, but by acquiring the ability to see the true nature of what is happening and to respond appropriately. Then, well, they talk about self one and self two in this book, which we may have to talk about, but then self one's reaction to the situation is not able to disrupt your inner balance or clarity. So, my question to you regarding that, Steve, is in a potentially life threatening situation with all the training that you've had, since all of your hard skills are automatic, are subconscious, is there a place that you go in your head or that time slows down and you just know what to do to stay calm? Or are there any times in the past where you've had to check yourself to make sure you didn't panic? Like how do you do that and have that inner stability?
So, like anything, let me give you an example. So, you shoot, correct?
Mhm.
You're a shooter. And when you first learn to come out of the holster, step one, step two, step three, all that. Do you currently still think now at your skill level? Do you think, okay, grip, draw, hands come together? Do you think about it, or does it just happen?
It just happens. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've done it enough times where you have become familiar with it, you're comfortable with it, and over time, with that level of comfort comes consistency, competence, all these things, and of course, number of repetitions, successful repetitions. You've met with tremendous success after who knows how many repetitions, and that pushes it further and further away from your conscious mind because it doesn't need to be there anymore.
Mhm.
Like tying your shoes, you don't think, okay, let's see, right hand over left hand here. You don't think, right? It just happens. You don't think when you drive. Apply 37.2% to the brake at this very moment. You don't think like that. It's not a conscious decision. You just move your foot and the car stops.
Mhm.
So there is a point where all of your skills become subconscious, and it doesn't require your conscious thought. So given that, that's the premise of it, you're free to, because your conscious mind is not occupied with the actual skill itself. Your conscious mind should be occupied with absorbing good information in, so that you can make a quality decision. Good information gives you all the opportunity to make a quality decision, and then is it an actionable item? Is it not an actionable item? If it is an actionable item, which is the best course of action? And then, of course, your subconscious kicks in based on that decision. However, there's a time component here. It takes time for you to observe what's going on. If you are in condition yellow, if you are engaged with your mind in your environment and you are seeing and not looking, and then if you have that input, that information that's coming in, you evaluate that information, make a decision based on relevant information, and all of that takes time. The input, the observation, the input, the mental engagement, the deliberation. It may take quarters of a second or half seconds or whatever, but it adds up. And in any event, are you ahead or behind the power curve? You're behind, right?
Mhm.
So every second that you waste processing information is pushing you further and further behind the power curve. So really the trick is to develop your skills at a high enough level to the left of bang, proactive measures. The more proactive you can be, the more proficient you are at your proactive measures, the less you will have to rely on your subconscious skills.
But I feel like there's another component in there that maybe you don't have, but I would, Steve. And that is managing your fear, your
Uh,
panic, perhaps. That's what I was referring to with inner stability. How do you
uh,
develop that?
so did you get to the I'm sure you read the chapter on fear, right? Controlling fear. So
Yes.
there's two.
I gotta find it here.
It's okay, don't worry about it. You can control fear both proactively and reactively. And I won't, bore our listeners and viewers on all the details, but the bottom line is there are techniques utilized by various agency personnel who are in it all the time, and in the real world scenarios that force them to make those critical decisions in a split second of a time. And the greatest, I should say, a very common question I get asked a lot of times when I'm teaching is, what happens if I freeze? Well, you don't know that you will freeze. You don't know that unless you've been in a situation before and you did. You don't know
pay
that.
attention to that comment about snakes. That's not true. Adam's lying. Adam's lying.
Okay, I will not.
That's a joke. Anyway, sorry to interrupt you.
If you will freeze, you don't know. You may not. But if you do freeze, there are things you can do to unfreeze, and there are things that you can do prior to finding yourself in a situation where you may freeze that can inoculate you and desensitize you to the fear component. So just like you can control a muzzle at higher speeds, you can control your own fear proactively. So in other words, dry firing allows you to feel what it's like and get all your mechanics down prior to confirming that on the range with a live round. The same thing with fear. If you practice some of these exercises, these proactive measures ahead of time, then should the event ever occur, you now have already processed it. You've seen it before. It's no longer. Let me give you a little bit more background on this, because it's a very good question. I want to be thorough. Most people have a tendency to freeze in a situation where the brain must process information that's new, unfamiliar, and threatening. Those are the three: new, unfamiliar, and threatening. Nothing you can do about the threatening. A threat's a threat. So 1/3 of it, there's nothing we can do about it. However, 2/3 of that equation, we can melt the ice around with the potential fear. One of them is it's no longer new. So when you train and you put yourself in different scenarios, simunitions or simulators or anything along those lines, where you're placing yourself in particular situations, your brain is becoming, okay, this is no longer new. I'm in a situation, I've seen it before. There's a file that your mind can now go to because it's no longer new. And then the more you do something, you keep putting yourself in that situation, whether it's simunitions training or blue gun training or whatever it is, you are constantly becoming more and more familiar with the feeling of that situation. So now you've eliminated the newness, you've eliminated unfamiliarity. Again, there's nothing you can do about the threat, but take away 2/3 of that equation, and you have taken away 2/3 of the probability of you freezing.
Wow. That's really good. Really, really good. Hi, Trish. I see you're on here. Yes, sir. What were you going to say?
I also want to go back to, you made a very interesting comment earlier.
Oh, I'm sure I did.
About failure. I'd like to talk a little bit about failure, because I'm sure everybody here trains, Yeah. And as you're trying to get better, at your skill, let's use shooting since we're all shooters. You get to a certain point where you're holding yourself accountable to accuracy and speed, and so then you want to push it a little bit and develop, go a little faster, make it more difficult, et cetera, et cetera. And at some point, the wheels fall off and you fail. So there's no way to know where the wheels fall off until you fail. So failure is a training tool. And I know this from the martial arts. I know this from I have a tremendous background in hard skills and, of course, shooting. And if I may share one of my favorite quotes here with you, and that is, the master has failed more times than the novice has tried. So if you're not failing, you're not learning.
That's good to hear.
So well done on your win.
Yeah, that's funny. I think what was it, guys? Do you remember last week or the week before? I think I talked about failure, but I totally agree with you. But you know what? It is just no fun sometimes, Steve. It's no fun at all.
Right.
But
Well,
but it can
well,
be a really great learning opportunity.
when you fail, okay, I fail a lot. Right? I'm trying to get better, so I fail often. I fail more times than I succeed. So the reason why is because I'm pushing myself well beyond my skill envelope. And when you fail, you learn. So you have successes, or some people call it failure. I call it a lesson. What did that round teach you that failed? Why are you to the left or to the right, or not where you wanted the round to go? Why? And as you learn what that lesson taught you, here's where we get lost. We all get lost when we get emotionally attached to failure.
Hmm.
To me, you watch the greats. You watch, Rob Latham and Travis and Kyle Schmidt. I'm going to throw one in for Kyle here. You watch these GMs. You watch them do their magic, and when they fail, it doesn't offend them at all. I mean, they could care less. A failure and a success is the same. They're looking at the performance part of it.
Right.
What did I learn from that? There was a time in my training where I took every failure as a personal assault on my family name. You cannot remain emotionally attached to a failure. Okay, big deal.
So true.
Okay, there's a round to the left. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. What caused that? Oh, instead of looking at the target, I looked at my daughter, whatever it was. That was the cause. That's the lesson. Okay, I learned from that. I am not emotionally attached to that failure. So there's no feeling. And if there's no feeling, then you're just learning. It's a wonderful learning experience.
Well, you know what it was for me, though? I had expectations because I hadn't done this thing in a long time. And I had expectations where I thought I maybe would be, and I was not there at all. So that's a learning to manage your expectations process. But honestly, though, Steve, my emotion because of the failure has actually fueled a fire. In, I think, a positive way. I don't know, but it has definitely been a wake-up call, and has fueled a fire for improvement. So I think that's a positive, don't you?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's an emotion. So I don't know.
No, anytime you can take away a positive from your training, that's a success.
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect. Well, we are getting towards the end of the broadcast. I see we have a couple of questions here. So are you game for some questions?
Yes,
Steve?
I am, Laura. I am.
Okay. And before we go, I do want to make sure that I give you the opportunity to share with people anything, that you want to leave them with before we go. So I got to make sure I remember that. All right, let's see who the first question is. Hi, Steve. Can you speak to the difference in the two new knives?
Oh, Miss Eddie. Hi. From Texas. Yes. So my new line launched yesterday, D-Day. We wanted to launch in honor of D-Day, and there's the classical folding karambit, and then there's the Bramp, which has a little cutout at the base of the blade, and that's the automatic open when you pull it out of your carry position. So that's the difference between the two. One opens up with a friction device, and the other just is the normal, using your thumb or hand to open the blade. That's the difference between the two. Both of those can be found. Yes, I do know you. Both of those can be found at highdesertbladeworks.com. highdesertbladeworks.com.
Perfect. Okay, and I don't know how to say this. Beula? Do you mind discussing the importance of visualization and building I don't know if I say that right, heuristics models for pre-planned decision making and how it reduces reactionary lag time.
Yes, I am a proponent of that. And that's mostly what I do with my classes, because most of what I do now is train the trainer. I teach teachers how to teach this stuff. And it's critical, the importance of that, because one of my co-workers at Gunsite is a guy named Lou Gosnell. Laura, you know
Oh, I
Lou.
know him. Yes.
He has one of my favorite terms: play it in the theater of your mind. The more you can play, you can visualize using cognitive visualization of an event, or even just here's a little drill we can all do in your mind right now. Feel what it's like to reach down to your handgun in the holster. Feel the pressure of your master grip against the gun in the holster. Now feel it dragging out of the holster as you move up into your into your support hand. So you are experiencing that mentally, visually.
Mm-hmm.
You're getting reps visually. I asked some of the GMs that I work with, I go, because a couple of these guys tell, oh yeah, when I go to the world champion, I'm on an airplane. I train when I'm on the airplane. And I'm like, what? How can you can't bring a gun on the airplane. How do you train? Well, just a few moments ago, that little drill that I ran us through with the presentation in your mind, they go through it in micro granular detail in the theater of their mind. And the subconscious doesn't know the difference between an actual repetition and a visualized repetition. Guess
That's
what?
crazy.
You're getting perfect repetitions. So if you apply this to real world threats, the same thing. Being able to make a quality decision based on relevant information. The more times you do it, guess what? That
Better
becomes
you get.
more familiar, no
Yeah.
longer new. And the benefits are long-term and short-term, because your brain now has something to go to, whereas it didn't before.
That's really good. Really good stuff. Clint wants to know, Steve spoke about looking versus seeing and mentioned his fellow agents were always seeing. Can you briefly describe how to see a crowded room?
Sure. So, you are looking for, let me back up. So you are either in a low threat environment or a high threat environment, or somewhere in between, lower threat or higher threat environment. So based on the condition of your environment will make a determination on how and what you're looking for. But let's take a low threat environment. You're going to a restaurant, in a nice neighborhood, low threat environment with your family. You walk in, you scan for any, what I would consider, indicators that may mean a potential threat. You're looking for anomalies. You're looking for things that should be there that aren't there, or that are there that shouldn't be there. Unusual behaviors, all these things, these potential threat indicators. Should you observe one? Now, let me go back to the point that was made, and that is not just throwing your eyeballs on it. You have to be mentally engaged with it, because for you to absorb that relevant information, it has to be input so that you can make the decision based on good information. If you're just passing your eyeballs across it, i.e. looking at your watch and having to look at it again, you never got the information in the first place. So being mentally engaged with the process of observing potential threat indicators is how you reduce that time from A to B when you're making your decision.
Yeah, and we're not talking about, are we, Steve? We're not talking about your head on swivel constantly,
No, no, you
being
can't do
paranoid or anything like that.
that.
Just being
Absolutely.
aware.
Just your awareness. Okay, so I always get the same question. Paranoia is, it's a mental delusion thing, and that is a complete. You're looking under desks and behind every shadow. That's not what this is. That's not what this is. Your job. Again, remember, you got to establish what is my responsibility. If I'm going over to my relative's house for a pool party, I'm not going to be in that mode, because my responsibility is to have fun, talk to people, have a hamburger, that's my responsibilities. But when I'm out and I'm on a job, or I'm with someone, or I'm with a family member, and I'm in public, no matter where you go today, it represents a potential threat. So based on the environment, you're going to raise or lower your expectation for that potentiality, and then to have the ability to engage your mind in the process of being observant. It's not hypervigilance. It's relaxed observance. That's all that is.
I've heard somebody talk about it being curiosity almost. Does that make sense?
Say that one more time.
Being
a what?
curious, just being curious about your environment, just wondering what's going on and paying attention to it in a curious way.
Right. I mean, here's the opposite. Sometimes it's better to have contrast. So imagine the person who walks into, again, a supermarket, let's say, and they walk in the door, they have their cart, they look from left to right, and, oh, that's right, I'm going to get some apples, and they'll go towards the apple. Versus the person who walks in, doesn't look, they're looking at their hair. I'll do the classic pose here.
Yeah, it's sad, but true. Yeah.
So that's the contrast. Person A versus person B. Who do you think is the softer target?
Right. Yeah. No brainer. Very good. Well, we're over the hour mark now, Steve. Yeah, and I didn't get all the questions asked, and honestly, I didn't expect to, but I do want to give you an opportunity. If people want to train with you, where do they go? What's coming up? Where can they find you? Give us the scoop.
Sure thing. So, I still service federal contracts, and I have agreements with various sheriff's departments, etc. So those classes are closed to USG and Leo only. But my civilian classes are listed on my website, stevetarani.com, and you just click on schedule, and it tells you what classes are available. And then if you're interested in any of them, you click on register or more information, and it'll guide you right through where to go and how to do it. I teach literally across the country, and I work in different states, and the classes are usually hosted by a range or an entity or an organization. So the information is available right there online.
And you're going to be offering an online training solution too, is that correct?
Yes. So the very good questions that our viewers tonight have listed, those are, the book is one thing, but the book on steroids, and it's not going to be out for probably another couple of months here, but perhaps down the road we could do another interview just on that. There's so much information. So I have partnered with a very well-known online criminal justice university, and we have a full-blown university EDU awareness-based training learning management system. So you can take a collegiate course online, resulting in a certification of the soft skills that we're talking about.
And so if we have you on again, Steve, that will be already implemented, and our next episode could be all about that if you wanted to be.
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, the website will be up and running, and there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of pieces, and it goes into minutia of how and it's not complex. It's not designed for DOD. It's not designed for Leo. It is designed for us normal Earthwalkers that in our language that we can develop those skills, take these lessons home, develop the skills, and we do drills, etc. online. There are knowledge checks, and there's a final exam. It's literally a university course. And then when you have completed that course, you have been trained up with what I consider to be the fundamentals of protective service training.
Wow. I might have to take that.
Oh, yeah.
That might be on my list, Steve.
I'll send you the info once
I've got such a long list, though.
Well, I think you would really appreciate this one. Here's what I get a lot of times. What can I, my daughter is going away to college in September. She's never been away from home. This is going to happen to you too with your daughter.
I know.
What can I give her that will keep her safe in a new environment and with all these new people, et cetera, et cetera. Well, there's no better gift than the gift of training and knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Such good stuff. Oh my gosh. Well, Steve, is there anything that you want to leave our listeners with before we go?
Well, I have to share my own my own my own advice to my students and my teachers that I work with, and that is, to your point earlier, Laura, you have to fail. If you're not pushing yourself to failure, you're not going to go beyond the skills envelope. You're not going to step outside your comfort zone and be comfortable with it. Be comfortable
Mm-hmm.
being uncomfortable. That's kind of the advice. And the more you can do that and learn from your mistakes, the further you're going to get in the direction you want to go. You have to accept it. And failure is part of learning. And in fact, it ends up being the very best teacher. Have you ever heard the saying, there's no greater teacher than experience?
Mm-hmm.
That's it. So get out there.
That's
and
really
fail.
encouraging. Get out there and fail. Fail constantly, guys. You can't fail enough. I led the pack last week on that, so I'm glad that I could be at the tip of the spear for failure. But yeah, it's all a good thing. And Steve, gosh, so much experience, so much wisdom. We appreciate your time so much, and I really do hope we can have you on again later in the year, and we can go in even a little bit deeper, if you don't mind. That would be so much fun.
Yeah, once that course is up, I think it would be of tremendous benefit to all of our viewers.
I think so too. All right. Well, we're going to move on here. And I just want to let you know what to expect next week. In store next week, we have, let's see, when is that? We're in June, guys. Do you realize we're halfway through the year? Oh, I just realized that today and I went, oh my gosh, how did this happen? So next week is June 14th and we're going to have Thomas Yoxel on. He has a survival story that he's going to share with us. And I have not heard this story. I will be hearing it for the first time along with all of you. And, but what I do know about his story is that it's incredibly inspiring and that he demonstrated incredible bravery in this survival story. And I know for a fact that there's a lot to be learned from this. So I hope that you'll join me next week for Thomas Yoxel. That'll be next week, Wednesday at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. I hope to see you there. Until then, take care.